And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another exciting installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly and permanently ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. It's Friday, and thank God it is. I don't know about you, but I think this week has just continued on, and, kind of about like Wednesday or Thursday, I thought this would never end. Of course, that's what it feels like when it's been raining all week. And as we all know, it's spring in the Cowboy State, and we get a lot of rain. Thank God we do. For a while, I was worried about the snowpack on the mountain. Now, if you're listening from far off in the nether regions of the country, you won't quite understand the importance of snowpack. But we've had no problem with it recently. In fact, it's been raining down here, snowing in the mountain for the last couple of days. So I think we're in pretty good shape for the summer. Now, to begin the program, you'll notice on the Cowboy State Politics chalkboard that we have some breaking news coming to us from those at CNN. Now, this is a story I covered yesterday on the program that CNN is all upset about a flag that's being flown by Justice Alito. And it's an interesting flag. It's one that you might recognize if, if you're a student of history, a student of the American Revolution. But let me just play for you the breaking news from CNN.
The breaking news this hour involving the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito. For the second time in 2 weeks, there is now reporting that a provocative flag embraced by Trump supporters was flown at one of Samuel Alito's homes.
No, say it isn't so. Breaking news on CNN. A justice on the Supreme Court has flown a flag. Now, there's a lot of stuff happening in our country. Joe Biden's going off his rocker. They're trying to throw President Trump in jail. We've got a surge at the southern border that's about to happen again. Immigration is out of control. Thank you, sleepy Joe Biden. There are a number of things that CNN could report as breaking news. But instead, it's that Samuel Alito is flying a flag at his home. Now, the first time they reported, and first of all, actually, before I go into that, this is a really long soundbite, but actually, I think it's incredible. They go on for about 3 minutes talking about the implications of a Supreme Court justice flying George Washington's flag. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this story, the Supreme Court Justice, Samuel Alito, was caught in pictures flying the flag that says an appeal to heaven. Now, that flag was designed by George Washington's personal secretary. They needed a Navy flag, and George Washington liked that one, so it was commissioned as the Navy flag. It's the white one with the white background. It's got a pine tree on it, and it says an appeal to heaven. Now, that must be controversial for those people at CNN. It's like anything referring to heaven. makes them, convulse and, throw up in their mouths a little bit. But we're only going to listen to part of this soundbite. The darn thing is like 5 minutes long. But it's got two reasons for listening to it. One, they go on and on and on about this ridiculous flag as if it's some sort of like national security problem. And then they ask John Bolton about it. And John Bolton's response to Wolf Blitzer, who is the anchor leading this whole broadcast, is absolutely amazing. So we'll listen to a little bit of their analysis into the breaking news of the day, and then we'll get to John Bolton.
It's in his vacation house out in New Jersey. Our justice correspondent, Jessica Schneider, is joining us now. She's got the details. Tell us about this New York Times report, this latest one, Jessica.
Yeah, Wolf, apparently numerous neighbors at that Long Beach Island home are talking to the New York Times, telling them about this most recent flag. Of course, it was just last week on Friday that there were those reports of the upside down or inverted American flag that was seen carried by supporters of the Stop the Steal movement around January 6th at Alito's Virginia home. This time, it's this so-called Appeal to Heaven flag. You're seeing it there, flown outside his home on Long Beach Island in New Jersey.
Okay, the so-called Appeal to Heaven flag. It's not so-called. That's what the thing says. And why is it so shocking that someone would fly a flag out in front of their house that says an appeal to heaven? And if you research this, and I went through this on the program yesterday, that if you're not getting what you want from your temporal authorities, your government, then the only recourse you have is to appeal to God. And as everybody knows, that had it not been for preachers and ministers and an extraordinary amount of faith during the American Revolution, we most certainly would not be living in the country we are today. So, I mean, the flag is, first of all, it's George Washington. So who would, only the liberals would have a problem with George Washington. But secondly, you're asking for God's intervention, which is something all of us should be doing each and every day. And quite frankly, the magnitude of the problems we're facing right now are only going to be solved with God's help. I mean, that is the only way. And really, I mean, that's the only way any of your problems get solved, if you want to know the long and the short of it. But that this is controversial, that this is breaking news, is in and of itself breaking news. Let's continue.
Now, it has a history dating back to the Revolutionary War, but it has recently become a symbol for supporters of former President Donald Trump. Now, as for this most recent revelation, Justice Alito has not responded to these pictures published by the New York Times. We did hear.
Mr. Supreme Court Justice, could you respond to a picture of a flag that's flying at your house? Why are you appealing to heaven? Why are you aligning yourself with January 6th protesters? It is so ridiculous, my friends, that this is the level that we've stooped to, that this counts as breaking news on the Communist News Network. But it tells you a lot, a little bit more, I think, about where we're at as a country, that we have to question anything that says an appeal to heaven. And we have to link it to some sort of sinister plot, which, by the way, I would argue that the vast majority of people that are in jail for January 6th, were only guilty of walking through an open door. That was how Harmeet Dillon described it during my interview, that the only thing a lot of these people are guilty of is walking through an open door. So anyway, that this is breaking news, that it is news at all, is in and of itself news. Let's continue here. And I'm gonna have to fast forward a little bit, and so we can get John Bolton's reaction. But like I said, this thing goes on for quite a while.
From Justice Alito on Friday, he released a statement.
Rush to find some reason to criticize Alito. Take a flag from the American Revolution.
Times.
Okay.
But no doubt, Wolf, calls could keep growing.
We'll go from here. I haven't quite upgraded the Cowboy State Politics studio to where I can, fast forward and find the stop and starts and things, and this is a good time to talk about this. The Cowboy State Politics studio and the Independence Network are continually a work in progress. So, if you're watching on cowboystatepolitics.com, and if you pay attention, you'll notice that there's small changes in the studio. Like I said, it's a work in progress, and it'll probably never be done, never be finished. But anyway, I don't possess the ability to just fast forward and find the stop and start. So anyway, let's listen to a little bit more. John Bolton's coming up here pretty quick.
Now that this latest revelation has come out in the New York Times.
We'll be watching the reaction. Jessica, thank you very much. Joining us now, Donald Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton. He's also the former U.S. ambassador to the UN. Ambassador, thanks for joining us. So as you just heard, a second flag related to the January 6th events was flown outside another one of Justice Samuel Alito's homes. Does this, in your mind, raise concerns about whether he can impartially serve on the U.S. Supreme Court?
Absolutely not. I think it is outrageous and unacceptable for people to take a flag from the American Revolution and say that because some January 6 protesters flew it, that it's now unacceptable to fly that flag. And I'd like to hear a Democratic Party politician say that expressly. You know, the January 6 people flew a lot of flags. The Gadsden flag, don't tread on me. They don't have the right or the ability to expropriate a patriotic symbol of the United States and then have everybody else say it belongs to them and condemn.
Okay, now you can't see this, of course, but in the background, when they're talking to John Bolton, they're playing scenes from January 6th. And the most shocking ones, where people are jumping over barriers and smashing windows and stuff. Amazing. But it's not outside the realm of things that we wouldn't expect from CNN. Of course, they're going to try to discredit everything that their guest is saying, even though that John Bolton is one of the biggest never-Trumpers around. I mean, he served with the president, and then when he got fired, then he went all full tilt against President Trump. It's personal for John Bolton, but what's interesting here is that he's going back and forth with Wolf Blitzer, saying, "Oh, you're off your rocker. It's shocking that you would associate this flag with January 6th." But let's listen to a little bit more, and then we'll move on.
Sam Alito or anybody else for flying that flag. I think what's unacceptable is this rush to find some reason to criticize Alito. You know, I first heard about the upside down American flag as being a January 6th symbol when I read about it in the New York Times about a week ago.
Okay, now that's really important. So John Bolton was the national security advisor, right? He's the guy that gets all the intelligence and then tells the president what is and what is not important. And he says the very first time he heard about this was in the New York Times. If this has been going on since January 6th of 2021, why has this not been a story until now? Well, it's because it was made a story by the New York Times. That's the first time that John Bolton heard about it. Let's continue just a little bit more.
I have no idea what was on Justice Alito's wife's mind when she flew it. But if somebody hadn't told me that they thought it was a symbol of the January 6 people, I wouldn't have guessed it. I would have thought maybe she was giving the finger to one of her neighbors. And that may not be appropriate either. But I'm telling you, it's gotten to a point where people trying to take symbols of American patriotism and turn them against Supreme Court justices is over the line.
Okay, that's the point right there. And the soundbite goes on, but I think we've had enough of it for today. But what John Bolton said right there at the end is really, really important, that the media and their acolytes are trying to take symbols from American history and associate them with some sort of like anti-government conspiracy. The Gadsden flag is one of them that showed up on the FBI's. Oh, you remember that whole terror pyramid that I told you about? The FBI put out, extremist pyramid or whatever it is that they called it, that if you saw somebody sporting the Gadsden flag, like was on my T-shirt yesterday on the program, well, they're somehow connected to some sort of extremism. And now they're trying to take a flag that says an appeal to heaven and associate that with January 6th. Absolutely incredible that they're doing that. And absolutely inappropriate. It tells you the depth of the depravity that the media will go to in trying to denigrate conservatives, Republicans, and anybody that supports President Trump, that they are grasping at straws. that even they have to reach all the way back to the American Revolution, which, by the way, all of this imagery is very, very patriotic. And, it's been a while since I've talked about this guy, but, here's a weird connection. A couple of months ago, I was telling you all about the new Argentine president. Now, when he was running for office, pictures of his rally showed the Gadsden flag being flown in the crowd. Now, this is in Argentina. We're not talking about like Casper, Wyoming, or in the Bronx in a story we'll get to here in just a second. This is in Argentina. So all of these flags, this imagery, they're all symbols of freedom. And that is what the media and everybody on the left really objects to. The very notion that all of us are free and that we have the freedom to conduct our own lives without interference from the government. Now, when you add in Wolf Blitzer trying to make this a bigger story than it is, that just shows you that the media is in the tank with this, and they are just grasping at anything possible to make Donald Trump look bad and make everybody who supports him look bad. Now, that's where we're going to go after the break. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a selection of better news, entertainment, and commentary than right here on the Independence Network, with great voices like Joey Carenti from Just Blame Joey, Ken Pendergraft from The Ramble Room, Tom Kelly from Wide Right Turn, and the lovely Christine from The Hair Affair. And of course, my program, Cowboy State Politics, Wyoming's most listened to political program. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program.
I remember I was 8 years old with a blank tape waiting by the radio. Come on, man, play it back in black. I want to play it back on repeat. I remember Panama City, long nights with a girl named Christy. She took me down to the Paradise City, then up on Cripple Creek. Still something about a guitar cranked up, head banging to the beat of the bass drum. Still something about a sold out show in the second row with your girl on your shoulder. Still something about raising a cold beer when the lights go down and the crowd cheers. From Delta Soul to Abbey Road, sweet child to sweet home. Still something about rock and roll, rock and roll. Still something about rock and roll, rock and roll. Rock and roll. I saw a Journey in the big Coliseum. No dancing, no lip syncing. I tell you,
Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. Documented to be almost always right at least 98.97% of the time, which is a record that the mainstream media can't even come close to. And they shouldn't even try because it's going to be a losing effort. You can look back through just about every article and you'll find something that Trotsky has done wrong. And one of those we covered on the morning show, just to give you an example, there's a convicted rapist that State Representative Landon Brown, which, by the way, it's been well over 1,260 days since he agreed to come on the program and then didn't show up. Well, anyway, he testified on behalf of the convicted rapist and actually called him a man of God. But in the article, and this is the point that I'm getting to, there's no mention that he's a member of the Wyoming caucus. There's no mention that Landon Brown is a far left, state legislator. Nope, none of that. But if it were you or I, if it were a conservative, they would say, who is aligned with the hard right conservative Freedom Caucus, who is facing an opponent in this election. And Trotsky would go on and on. But not in this case. Nope. They're totally in the tank with the Wyoming caucus, and it's proven on their website, because if you go all the way to the bottom of any web page, it'll say, our presenting partners. You know what the definition of a partnership is? It means you're kind of in business together and that it's a mutually beneficial relationship and that you're both making money off of it. That's what a partnership is. So the mainstream media shouldn't even try to come close to the record of Cowboy state politics because, we actually use things like facts and data, things that the Wyoming caucus and the mainstream Wyoming press are not even familiar with. Now, if you're watching on Cowboy State Politics Live, which you can each and every day of the live program, you can watch exactly what's happening in the studio right from the website. Just go to cowboystatepolitics.com, click on the live link, and it'll take you right to a page where you can watch everything that's happening in the studio. But anyway, if you are watching, you'll notice that I'm all New Yorked up today. And there's a good reason for that, my friends, because our pal Donald Trump was in the Bronx and held a rally. And it's the fascinating thing about this is even Trumpy was expecting 3,500 people. 25,000 showed up. Now, this is in the Bronx, in the middle of New York City. And 25,000 people showed up to hear the former president speak. Now, I've got sound bites of at least part of it, a little bit of his speech, and a couple of articles about it, which is where we're going next. But let me tell you about why I'm all New Yorked up. Because New York finally showed up for at least some version of conservatism. Now, I've got the New York Mets hat on. Now, I know, not exactly appropriate for the Bronx, because the Yankees is the baseball team that plays in the Bronx. But my friends, I only have two favorite baseball teams. One of them is the Texas Rangers, and the other is anyone who beats the New York Yankees. So clearly, I would never own a New York Yankees hat. However, I do own the New York Mets hat. How could you not love the Mets, the amazing Mets, the 69 Mets? I think of Donald Trump. I think of New York Mets. But again, I'm kind of a baseball fanatic. And then I've got the Hard Rock Cafe shirt on from New York City. So I'm all in support of those New Yorkers that came out to watch President Trump, as they should have. Maybe they're finally pulling their head out of the nether region where they had stuck it. So from the New York Post, and now the New York Post is a fairly conservative organization. So this article is not all that surprising coming from them, but it's interesting that it is in New York. And the title is, Trump will win if he does more speeches like the one in the Bronx. And I quote, We are going to win New York, Donald Trump boasted at what he described as his Bronx Love Fest Thursday evening. Well, maybe. But Trump's unexpected rally did show he can win enough of the country to take back the presidency. First was the setting itself. Now, you don't see Joe Biden flying into Texas or Louisiana for a rally. He has a hard enough time convincing registered Democrats that he's not a failed president. Trump has an energized base, giving him the flexibility to say, spend a weekend on a New Jersey beach or an evening in the boogie down Bronx. He's actively courting Black and Hispanic voters, and it's having an impact. Democrats have taken these groups for granted for so long that Trump rightly sees that they're hungry for change. Biden's speech at Morehouse College was an appeal to victimhood, claiming that America has been and always will be a racist nation. Trump is pitching opportunity, a better life. Speaking of which, Trump spent part of his Bronx speech talking about his career as a real estate developer, about perseverance, and about his love for New York City. It's a welcome change from the parade of grievances that have marked his rallies last year. Our advice to Trump: do this more. Your business background was part of what appealed to voters in 2016. People don't just want a litany of what's wrong. They want to know what you're going to do and are doing to improve their lives. Now, I've got just a brief soundbite from the Trump rally. I think it's just right at the beginning, but let's listen into a little bit of what old Trumpy had to say.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions, if I may, on...
No, one.
Oh, no, that's the wrong soundbite, but we're going to play that one too. Anyway, apparently I don't have that. It's too bad. That was a pretty good display. I'll play some for you on the Tuesday broadcast. By the way, while we're on the subject, I should probably tell you that there won't be a Cowboy State Politics Live on Monday. It's Memorial Day, and I'm going to take at least part of the day off. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do a podcast. I usually do one on Memorial Day, but the lovely Christine and I have a couple of things going on. So we might just have to skip that one. Now, one of the people who really doesn't like Donald Trump is New York Governor Kathy Hochul. And she had her own deplorables moment right before the Trump rally. Here's what Kathy Hochul had to say.
Well, I'll tell you, it won't make a difference at all, Jake, and that is for Donald Trump to be the ringleader of and invite all his clowns to a place like the Bronx. New York will never, ever support Donald Trump for president.
You know, to just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
Oh, that's so funny.
So racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it.
Yeah. So for Trump to invite all of his clowns down to the Bronx, I mean, it's not going to make a difference, according to Kathy Hochul from Fox News. And I quote, former President Trump says every state is now a border state until President Joe Biden, under Joe Biden at his Bronx, New York event. New York Governor Kathy Hochul appeared to call Trump supporters clowns on Thursday during a media appearance ahead of the former president's New York City rally in the Bronx. Quote, well, I'll tell you that what won't make a difference at all, Jake. And she's talking to Jake Tapper. And that's for Donald Trump to be a ringleader, invite all of his clowns to a place like the Bronx. So as you heard in that soundbite, I attached Hillary Clinton and her basket of deplorables to it, simply for reference, because this is what these elitists think of you. And make no mistake, my friends, there are these same elitists in Wyoming. Just for reference, in the last election, there were 943 people that voted for Joe Biden in Buffalo, Wyoming. Now, you think of Buffalo, Wyoming, and you think, well, Johnson County cattle war got to be a conservative place. 25% of the population votes with Joe Biden. So there are elitists in the media like Kathy Hochul and Hillary Clinton and all of their fans, but there are also elitists in the state of Wyoming. Former Senator Alan Simpson is one of those. He's one of the biggest never Trumpers in the entire state of Wyoming. And let's not forget, even though we got rid of her, Liz Cheney. Now, of course, I wouldn't claim Liz Cheney as a resident of Wyoming because she couldn't even claim that with her fishing license. If you recall, that's what derailed her first campaign against Mike Enzi. She got caught falsely claiming that she was a resident of Wyoming on a fishing license. And when that came out, she dropped out of the race. Now, she claimed it was for other reasons, but the real reason is she got caught. So there's never Trumpers and elitists in the media, in high positions of authority in other states, and in the state of Wyoming. And I would say that it's entirely bad strategy to call all of Trump's supporters clowns or deplorables, because you know who they're talking about? You and me and everybody that supports President Trump. And it's amazing how they throw us all into one category, like we're some big mob. And well, in their minds, we are. We're a mob that they don't like, that they don't have any respect for, and are only useful to them as voters. So, don't let comments like these slip out of your memory. Usually in politics, people's memory is pretty short. Things can happen and you kind of forget about them come election time. Let me give you a classic example. Bill Novotny, Johnson County Commission chairman, gets caught driving on the wrong side of the interstate while blackout drunk, while eluding police with an open container. When they stopped him, he blew a .187. He didn't even spend 24 hours in jail, only paid a $1,000 fine and had to serve a year of probation. And that's it. If it were any one of us, well, then, we'd be thrown in the hoosecow for quite a long time. Now, that guy got reelected by 1,000 votes. Think about that, my friends. 1,000 votes in Buffalo, Wyoming, or really in any Wyoming community. That's a big number. And so people's political memory is pretty short. So this is one of those that you don't want to let get past your memory. Let's take a quick break, and then we're going to continue on. There's a fascinating article about comparing Trump's campaign in New York to President Reagan, and I want to go through that. So we'll do that after the break. It's spring in the Cowboy State, or as Albert Sommers likes to say, spring-ish. Time to get the motorcycle out of the garage, time to go up the mountain, time to get outside and tromp around. And when you're doing that, you still want to make sure that you take care of your feet. The best way that you can do that is order a pair of Kenai boot socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. I know, your mama always told you that wool socks are only to be worn during the winter. But times have changed, my friends. The Kenai boot socks from the Buffalo Wool Company will not only keep your feet nice and toasty warm, they'll keep them cool and dry in the summer. Trust me, these are the most incredible socks that you're ever going to put on your feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. You're definitely not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Watch out. Cowboy State Politics and the Independence Network are only going to get stronger with great programming like Just Blame Joey, Who Are They?, The Ramble Room, Tom Kelly, the lovely Christine, and of course, Cowboy State Politics. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone, doing what I was born to do each and every day, executing host duties flawlessly with talent given to me by God himself. That's absolutely true, my friends. We should all be thankful for the talents that we're given. None of us have the same talents, which is the amazing diversity created by the good Lord up above. So, as I mentioned before the break, there's a great article comparing Trump's campaign in New York to that of President Reagan. Now, again, we don't really have that long of political memories, but let's just take kind of a step back in time here. And I quote, this article appeared on Breitbart. And I quote, a Republican presidential challenger campaigning in the South Bronx against an inflation-ridden and unpopular Democratic incumbent. I've seen this movie before. It was August 5th of 1980 when Ronald Reagan, the GOP nominee against President Jimmy Carter, traveled to the troubled borough of New York City to deliver his message, Make America Great Again. Yes, that came from Ronald Reagan, which is exactly the reason why Donald Trump chose it. Reagan had been encouraged by his ally, Representative Jack Kemp, to go to the inner city, there to preach the gospel of tax rate cuts, enterprise zones, and overall hope. Reagan did just that, standing on the very spot where Carter had stood 3 years earlier, there to make unfulfilled pledges about economic renaissance for the hood. I was a young and junior staffer on the Reagan campaign back then, so I watched, and this is the author speaking here, what could on TV network and glanced at scraps of wire copy coming off the AP ticker. Nothing was digital back then. It was, for sure, a raucous scene. Plenty of Bronx cheering. Relying on a microphone to make himself heard, Reagan shouted, I can't do a damned thing for you if I don't get elected. Reagan persisted, calling out Carter's failure. I have never seen anything that looked like this since London after the Blitz. Yes, in those days, some of the Bronx did look as if it had been bombed in wartime. That was Reagan's point. If the status quo is lousy, if the incumbent hadn't kept his promises, why would you vote to re-elect him? To put it in Trump language, what do you have to lose? Well, I'll show you.
True international pressure.
True international pressure is what he was trying to say, but instead it came out like this.
True international pressure.
And this.
Beer brewed here, it is used to make the brew beer in this refinery. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the Great Lakes. I wonder why it's called.
Why would you vote for that guy or the same guy that does all this stuff?
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by go. You know the thing.
True international pressure.
I got hairy legs that turn. I'm not gonna be a mule. I got something to do. I got to go do boom, boom, boom. I just spoke at Dartmouth on healthcare. At the medical school, or not, I guess I wasn't actually on the campus, but people from the medical school. 15 billion metric tons of CO2 going in the air. Well, folks, eliminate one tax loophole out of $1.6 trillion worth, $1.4 trillion worth. Out of $1.4 billion. It's hard to even say it, it's so much.
What do you have to lose? That is the only thing you have to lose in voting for Donald Trump. And a crashing economy. Did you watch the stock market yesterday? It fell over 500 points. That's the only thing you have to lose in voting for Donald Trump. Things can only get better from here. And we have evidence to support that. The entire Trump presidency, the economy improved for everyone. It's not just the rich and the powerful that the Democrats claim. It's everyone. So Reagan's message back in 1980 and Trump's message back in 2016. What do you have to lose? Now, the media coverage of the event was, of course, negative. I just played you the soundbite of Kathy Hochul saying that Trump invited his clowns down to the Bronx. There were the days when the modifier mainstream was not used because there was pretty much only big liberal media. Still, the New York Times headline captured at least one of the yeasty political dynamics that year. Reagan, in the South Bronx, says Carter broke his vow, raises voice above chants. Back at the campaign HQ at 901 North Highland Street in Arlington, Virginia, we told ourselves that the Gipper would at least get credit for guts. He had gone into a Democratic lion's den, kept his cool, displayed some star power, delivered his positive message. And so he'd get credit with the country, if not with New Yorkers. But the only difference here is that Trump was expecting around 3,000, 3,500 people. What he got was 25,000 people. 25,000 New Yorkers showed up to see the former president in the Bronx. So the literal hood of New York. So when you look at that, you have to say, maybe Trump won't win New York. He ought to. There's no reason why he shouldn't win every single state, just like Reagan did back in his landslide victory. But this is a telling, crystal ball looking event here. If he can get 25,000 people in the Bronx to show up, what can he do in actual places where he has a chance of winning? Like all of the battleground states that Trump is ahead in. It's amazing looking at the polls. And it shouldn't be any surprise to anyone because the Democrats have been pounding Trump relentlessly. All of the trials. I mean, he's off right now, but come Tuesday, he's going to have to be back in a courtroom. The thing down in Florida, Jack Smith's prosecution, which looks like it's kind of go off the rails. The judges even took that off the calendar. So all of the things that the Democrats are doing to President Trump are backfiring, as they damn well should, because the Democrats have done nothing for Americans the last 4 years. In fact, they've done nothing for them. And the only thing that they've done is hurt the U.S. economy, hurt individual Americans through their rampant money printing and inflation. That touches every single human being in this country. Every man, woman, and child is affected by inflation. It is the hidden tax that kills Americans' paychecks. And if you really want to know the numbers, in the last 4 years, actually in the last 2 or 3 years, your savings account has lost 15% of its value. That's the overall number just because of inflation. And anybody that tells you that inflation is just these greedy companies increasing prices is lying to you. Inflation is money printing, which is what the Biden administration has been doing to pay for all of their crazy adventures that they're having. Now, all of that rests on the shoulders of Americans. And you're not really going to find too many more places that are more expensive than New York City or, maybe San Francisco, California. But New York City, New Yorkers, they're feeling the pinch far more than the rest of the country. I mean, it's all proportional, but things were already, way more expensive in New York just from the very beginning. And so now you add the inflationary pressures on it, and New Yorkers, if they're smart, will just look at their paycheck, look at their bank account, and they'll see that they don't have anything to lose, just like in 1980. When Reagan said, I can't help you if I can't get elected. To put it in Trump language, what do you have to lose? And the only thing they have to lose is their entire life savings. An economy that's going to be dragged into the doldrums for the next 20 years if we allow Joe Biden to continue what he's doing to this country. So now let's go to 2024. 4 years ago, Donald Trump garnered a mere 16% of the vote in the Bronx as he lost the state by a wide margin. Nevertheless, Trump has been saying for months that he can win New York this year. Indeed, time, fate, and Alvin Bragg have caused Trump to spend a lot more time in New York than he otherwise would have planned. Already, Trump's April visit to Harlem, another hood in New York, where he shook hands with a crime victim who had fought back against a violent criminal, played well. Now today, it's not hard to find Trump curiosity in the Bronx. Indeed, a New York-only Siena poll from last month finds that by a 52-37 margin, New Yorkers feel their state is going in the wrong direction. A clear majority expressed concern about worsening crime, and a thumping 79% regard in the immigration crisis as serious. So while the poll showed Joe Biden ahead of Trump 47-38, If the incumbent is below 50, the challenger has some potential. So the end of all of this, my friends, is Trump can win New York, as he should. And if New Yorkers pull their head out of the nether regions where they've apparently placed it for the last 20 years in voting for Democrats, he will win New York. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll finish up the program.
I'm driving black on black. Just got my license back. I've got this feeling in my face. This train is coming off the track. I'll ask the light if the devil needs a ride because the angel of my ride ain't hanging out with me tonight. I'm driving past your house while you were sneaking out. I got the car door opened up so you can jump in on the run. Your mom don't know that you were missing. She'd be pissed if she could see the parts of you that I've been kissing, screaming, oh, we're never gonna quit. Ain't nothing wrong with it. Just acting like we're animals. No matter where we go, 'cause everybody knows we're just a couple animals. So come on, baby, get in. Get in, just get in. Check out the trouble we're in.
You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, entertainment, and commentary than on Cowboy State Politics Live. You know, the program you're listening to right now. And frankly, why would you want to look anywhere else anyway? Let's be honest, only a liberal redcoat commie would do that. And if you want to listen to my podcast, you can find it at cowboystatepolitics.com or anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. If your name is Sleepy Joe Biden and you can't remember if you put socks on this morning or not, well, I can't really help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president of the United States. And now, back to the program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm your host, David Iverson, burning through another busy broadcast hour on the Independence Network. Angry Joe Biden. There's only two things that guy can do. He either mumbles with gibberish,
True international effort to pressure.
or he gets angry, which is a clear sign of the dementia that he's suffering from. Well, recently at a press conference with the leader of Kenya, Joe Biden said that the press never keeps the deal. I wonder what that means. From, let's see here. I don't know where this one's from. I think it was from Fox News. Anyway, quote, President Biden lambasted the White House press corps Thursday, complaining that reporters never keep the deal when a journalist asked a second question at a joint press conference with Kenyan President William Ruto. The 81-year-old Biden repeatedly evinced confusion and irritation at the 32-minute event and mistakenly referred to his vice president as President Kamala Harris, making the error for at least the 8th time before trying to bar the reporter's second query. Quote, thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions, if I may, began the McClatchy newspaper chain's chief Washington correspondent, Michael Wilner. One of 2 U.S. journalists selected to ask questions. Yeah, so the president doesn't pick the journalists to ask the questions. Those are pre-selected. You apparently have to go through some sort of lottery. And his staff picks the people who are going to ask the questions. probably the people who are least likely to ask him some sort of challenging question. Well, anyway, he asked for 2 questions, and Biden says, no, 1. Now, this is the soundbite that I mistakenly played earlier. Let's give it a listen.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions, if I may, on...
No, 1.
I'm going to do my level best on Haiti and on Israel. And on Israel, does the United States...
1 question. I'll answer your question.
Okay. I do have a question for you, President Ruto. But before I do, I do very briefly have a question on whether the United States has any evidence at all that would substantiate the ICC prosecutors' specific allegations against Israeli leaders that they are using starvation as a tactic.
Look, we made my position known on ICC. You guys never keep the deal, but that's okay. We made it known on ICC. You guys never keep the deal, but that's okay.
You guys never keep the deal, but that's okay. So that sort of begs the question, doesn't it? What's the deal? My suggestion would be that if you get selected for a question to ask the geriatric president of the United States, then you have to follow simple rules that you can only ask 1 question and it can only be on this topic or that topic. We can only surmise as to what the deal the president was referring to, but it's very clear. It's very clear that President Biden just admitted that they are in collusion with the press, which, of course, is obvious to any observer. Why wouldn't they be? And really, they don't have to push that hard because the press, the mainstream press, both nationally and in Wyoming, is completely in the pocket of the Biden administration because they're all a bunch of liberals. Now, in Wyoming, they can't really get away with it as flagrantly as the national media, but there is always some sort of undercurrent about conservatism in the Wyoming press. And that's evidenced by, and just ask yourself a simple question. When is the last time you saw an article in either the Cowboy, the Pravda on the Platte, the Wyoming Turkey Vulture, Wyofile, the Cody Enterprise, the Powell Tribune, the Buffalo Bulletin, the Sheridan Press, Sheridan Media, any of them that has been the least bit critical of any of the redcoats? Just give me 1 example, and I'll issue the biggest retraction you've ever seen, but you won't find one. And I know that you won't find one because I've been tracking this story for a very long time. The press in Wyoming and nationally is in the pocket for the Democrat Party nationally, and because the Democrat Party in Wyoming isn't that strong at all, they're almost irrelevant. They're in the pocket for the liberal forces within the Republican Party. As it relates to that, on Weekend Update, I'm going to tell you the story of candidate for the House of Representatives, Thomas Lear. Now, Thomas Lear had an interview scheduled with Cowboy State Politics, and, let's just say he sent me a snotty email saying he wasn't going to show up. So we're going to cover that on Weekend Update, and I'm going to tell you all about Mr. Thomas Lear. So he could have come on the program and talked to me himself and defend his positions, but he chose not to. And in fact, that invitation is still open if he wants to do an interview. My guess is he probably won't, but there's a lot of stuff that people don't know about Thomas Lear that they are going to know after Saturday's installment of Weekend Update. Coincidentally, I'm also going to publish the interview with Reuben Tarver. Reuben Tarver is a representative over in Campbell County. It's a really good interview. He's got a lot of good stuff to say. So far, he doesn't have an opponent, but he reached out, and so we did an interview with him. So that'll play also on Saturday's installment of the podcast. Moving on, and this one should come as absolutely no shock to anyone whatsoever, but there's an exclusive report out that the feds secretly knew for years. Let me repeat that. Secretly knew for years that Joe Biden met with his son's Chinese partners on an official trip. And I quote, this comes to from justthenews.com. That's John Solomon's news site. John Solomon is an investigative reporter and a really good one. It's one of the more credible news sites out there. And I quote, federal agents gathered evidence during the 2016 election that Hunter Biden had used access to his father on an official government trip to Beijing aboard Air Force Two to connect prospective Chinese business partners with then Vice President Joe Biden, according to a massive cache of documents recently turned over to Congress and obtained by Just the News. Quote, "They got to meet Dad. All very good. Talk later," Hunter Biden wrote in a December 2013 email, confirming how he connected his Chinese associates with his father in a Beijing hotel after the vice president had met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The younger Biden also bragged in his emails that his father was so enamored with China's communist leader that, quote, "I think they're in love with each other," the emails showed. "They almost kissed on departure," Hunter Biden wrote in one of the emails seized by federal agents. The previously non-public communications were among the 3.3 million pages of emails, bank records, and corporate memos that the FBI, IRS, and Securities and Exchange Commission agents collected in 2015 and 2016 with subpoenas during a criminal investigation into fraudulent bond schemes involving a Native American tribe. So this goes back all the way to when Joe Biden was president or vice president of the United States, 2015, 2013, 2016, all the way through there. And the federal government knew about it the entire time and did nothing about it. The younger Biden wasn't charged in that case, though several of his business partners were. But agents in that probe did gain extensive access to Hunter Biden's bank files, corporate records, and communications, including some that were not located on the first son's now infamous laptop that would be seized by the FBI in 2019 and become a subject of political controversy a year later. The evidence, recently secured by the House Oversight Committee in the impeachment probe of President Joe Biden, shines a new light on how Hunter Biden sought to cash in on his family's famous name overseas, sometimes in the vapor trail of his father's official duties. It also substantiates impeachment inquiry testimony from former Hunter Biden business associates Devin Archer, Jason Galanis. Lawmakers told the Just the News. The only reason Joe Biden wanted to kiss President Xi was because state-affiliated companies were about to line his family's pockets with foreign wires and lucrative business opportunities, said House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer. So the feds, the Department of Justice, the FBI, they've known all about this since at least 2013, and nothing has come of it. And now, when people are looking into it, it is the FBI and the Department of Justice who are running interference for Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and anybody associated with the Bidens. It's just another example of this two-tiered legal system that I keep talking to you about. It's not justice in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it really is your rules for thee, but not for me. If you're a conservative and you commit all this stuff, unless it's really, really, really flagrant, like Bob Menendez and his bars of gold. I mean, that one, it's kind of hard to cover up. But unless you're really flagrant, you're going to get away with it. The Department of Justice isn't going to prosecute you. Now, if you're conservative, well, and you happen to pray at an abortion clinic, then they're going to prosecute you for crimes from years ago. That was a story I brought you yesterday on the program, where the federal government, the Department of Justice, the FBI, they're using what is called the FACE Act, which is an act. I can't remember what the acronym stands for right now, but it mandates access to abortion clinics, and you can't obstruct them in any way. So if you're a conservative that thinks perhaps that we should pray for babies that are about to be killed, well, then you're going to jail. But if your name is Hunter Biden and you're setting up business deals facilitated by your vice president father's jet, well, then don't worry about getting prosecuted at all. If you're setting up a whole bunch of shell companies, probably some of them at 30 North Gould in Sheridan, well, then you've got nothing to worry about. Nobody's going to investigate that. Nobody's going to prosecute you for it because you're a Democrat and you're a liberal. And the press, by and large, they're going to fall right in line. But, you know, as the president says, they never follow the deal. Well, we've burned through another busy broadcast hour on Cowboy State Politics Live. Now, remember, you can listen to the live program every weekday morning beginning at 10 a.m. You can watch what's happening in the studio on cowboystatepolitics.com. There's several people watching right now. Also, don't miss the podcast tomorrow on Cowboy State Politics. It's an interview with Ruben Tarver and an expose on who Mr. Thomas Lear is. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.